Welcome to Access Co-Leaders. We are with our students from Imhotep Institute Charter High School, our co-host, and Celesta Palmer, who is the licensed professional counselor and well-being consultant with CM Palmer Therapy. Welcome, everybody. Celesta, tell us, what are you doing at CM Palmer Therapy? What is this practice that you have?
Yeah, so I currently run my own private practice where I work with individuals and couples who are really seeking to repair hurt from their past, to really reestablish or establish for the first time healthy relationships, and really figure out how they can be their most authentic selves.
That's awesome. And tell us, did you start this company? Are you working for somebody? Tell us a little bit about that, your role with the practice.
So I transitioned from a kind of a group private practice in Chattanooga, Tennessee, where I'm located, and then decided to branch off on my own and create my own private practice, Celesta and Palmer Therapy. Again, it's just me right now, but I work with adults and individuals, adults and couples who are really looking to kind of dig deeper, figure out who they are, how they can have better relationships with themselves. I get to be my own boss. I get to create my own schedule. So that's amazing. And I get to really figure out who are the people I click most with when it comes to doing therapy work. And we kind of start the journey of healing together.
I love that. And you mentioned you're in Chattanooga. Tell us, where did you grow up? And your little bit of a journey, how you went from where you grew up to Chattanooga.
Yeah, it's been a journey for sure. So I am from Springfield, Virginia, which is right outside of Washington D.C. I grew up there. I was there for most of my 20s, and I met Eileen actually at a church in the D.C. area where I kind of jumped out of the corporate world in my early 20s into full-time ministry. I really wanted to figure out if I had kind of this like heart for people. I knew I cared about people, but did I really, really care about people? I had this, thought about becoming a counselor in my early 20s, but I wasn't quite, I think, confident enough in myself to feel like I could really pursue, um, this career path that really takes a lot of someone when it comes to kind of our emotional energy and when it comes to just psychological capacity to kind of be with people in some of their hardest days and hardest times. So I learned through full time ministry that yes, I do care about people and I want to build more skills to really figure out how I can help people in their healing journey. So I applied for a graduate program in Chattanooga, Tennessee for a master's in clinical mental health counseling, which is what my master's is in. That was a 3-year journey of going back to school, getting my master's degree, taking the test to kind of get licensed in Tennessee, and then really diving into my client work, which is really figuring out who are the people I work best with, what are the modalities, the kind of techniques I want to use as a therapist, and then how do I figure out how to make this a sustainable career for me and my lifestyle.
We want to get to know you more too, Celesta. Tell us a little bit about what you were like in your middle school and high school years. Like, what kept you busy? Were you involved in sports and clubs, your dynamics in your social circle? Tell us a little bit about that.
I would say in middle school and high school, I was pretty shy. So I was a little quiet, but I really loved music. So I was in band. I played the flute and I also did marching band. So we'd be at all the high school football games doing our little marching band stuff and playing all the fun songs in the stands. So that was great. I really put my academics first. So I wanted to make sure that I could get into a college that I would enjoy going to and like pursue whatever kind of career I thought I would have at that time. But yeah, I was quiet. I think I was still silly. And I really just wanted to kind of figure out like who am I and what is life and how can I even back then I was like how can I be helpful to people? How can I be helpful to my mom and my family? And so I always was kind of thinking about, what was going on outside of me and what my role could be and kind of understanding human dynamics. So I would say that started at an early age for me of just being curious about people and why we are the way that we are.
You were always curious. You started being you're a little bit quiet, but you were already curious in the
Yep.
middle school, high school ages. Tell me a little bit, share a little bit for context, the dynamics within your family, how many siblings you had, where you fell in that order, and what the personality exchange was like in your household.
So I have a 4-person household. So it was my mom, my dad, and my younger brother who is 1 year younger than me. So I'm the oldest, and I was, I think, kind of the typical, like, have it together older child where I was the good one, if you will, where I wanted to do the right thing. I wanted, to make my parents proud. I think I did the best I could with that. Again, there's no perfection here, but I was more of the let me kind of focus on school, let me kind of keep my head down and not try to get in trouble. My brother was a little bit more of the opposite. So he was the one that was like, oh, school might not be for me. I'd rather be out with the people and kind of doing, doing his own thing. So there was some tension in that. And I think for me, as the oldest, trying to understand, well, I know we got to figure out, how to make it out here in the world. What's going to be most valuable? How do I view school? How do I view friends compared to my brother? Both of my parents really value education and career, so that was something that was instilled in me in a young age, was that, if we work hard, that we can, like, get opportunities, and that opportunities allow us to kind of become who we really wanna be. And so that was something that my parents taught me, and that was valuable, and that was helpful to kind of where I got to be today, so grateful for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you for sharing that. Let's turn it over to our students. Torianne, you get the first question.
My question is earlier you mentioned that it took 3 years for you to get your master's.
Mhm.
So, and I know that with counseling and stuff, you have to have like you have to do internships.
Mhm.
So I want to know how long did it take for your internships for you to be fully licensed?
Okay, so the way that it works is that the first 2 years of therapy school are really learning how to do therapy and, like, the theory behind therapy, because there's so many different types of therapy. So those first 2 years were really doing all the classes where we learned about different techniques. My 3rd year of school was where we did a lot of the practical internship work. So for me, I interned at a college counseling center here in Chattanooga, and I interned there for a whole year. So that looked like being there for the summer, for the fall semester, and the spring semester before I graduated in spring of 2020. So that was a full year. And once you graduate, you then have to be under the supervision of a licensed counselor. So I could go out and practice therapy, but I had to have someone who was already licensed kind of vouch for me until I got about 1,500 hours of in-person time with clients. And then I could kind of take a big test and go out on my own. So it is a process of doing your internship while you're in school and then getting the supervised hours that take about 2 to 3 years to get after you're done with graduate school in order for you to be a fully licensed therapist. So about 6-year process.
Just 6 years. It'll fly by. I've known you guys for half that time.
Yeah, it went by fast. I will say you were busy working, so there's a lot to do.
Torel, your question?
Do you have, like, a favorite, like, client that you have worked with?
Ooh, that's a great question. I would say my favorite type of clients are young adults, so kind of like college age, because it's such a cool time in life where you're realizing that the way you grew up is not necessarily the way that the world is. And so I think with those clients, they're really figuring out, oh, okay, this is what my parents taught me. But I can kind of figure out for myself, what is the way that I want to interact with the world? What is it that I want to believe about myself and believe about the world? And it's this cool intersection of like figuring out who they are authentically and also navigating, what it is they want to hold on to about their families of origin and what they've grown up, learning and valuing, and then figuring out what feels kind of best for them. So it's really fun to kind of see these clients really wrestle with, okay, this is what I was taught growing up, but maybe this is not what I want to believe anymore. And so we get to kind of figure out what are these new value systems and new ways of seeing themselves that really fall more in line with what they believe about the world. And so that's, I think, one of my favorite clients. It's also just fun because it's still young enough to kind of be, I think, playful and silly in therapy. Because sometimes it's hard to sit there and tell someone you don't know, like, really hard things about your life. And so when we get to find ways to still kind of interact in what we have in common, that's also fun as well, and just to hear stories about them being in college and some of the social things that can be, a lot of ups and downs is really fun and helpful, I think, as well to kind of process through. So just an exciting time of life.
Good question. Miss Jenkins.
So I know sometimes like seeking help or getting therapy can be stigmatized, especially in like the Black and Brown community. Is there anything that you do in particular to try to like combat those stereotypes or to solicit those kind of participants in seeking help in the practice?
Yeah, so I work with some local grant programs that are specifically for Black and Brown people who may not have access to resources for therapy. Therapy is one of those things that unfortunately is not an equal access resource because it does cost money. And so I first of all make sure that I do work with grant programs that allow for funding for folks that may not be able to afford therapy but have a lot of trauma, whether it's generational trauma, whether it's, racial trauma, whether it's growing up trauma, childhood trauma. And so making myself available to those populations is really important to me as a person of color myself. And so I try to make sure that I have time on my schedule, that I clear out my schedule when it comes to, okay, these are specific types of clients who I really want to work with. And so catering myself to those populations when it comes to how I market, who I network with, and those kind of things, what do I have connections with to some of these like local community organizations. I also am a therapist who takes insurance. Not all therapists take insurance. I feel like when we go ahead and play, we pay into a medical system that's supposed to have these benefits for us, that it really is, I think, I think it's important for us as mental health providers to, again, be accessible. And so I'm paneled with 3 different insurance companies that are pretty widely known and that a lot of people have, so that people have access to me as a therapist and only have to pay, a $25 copayment or whatever it might be. I also, for those who may not have insurance, have reduced rates. So it might be, okay, you can come in and what can you afford? And we have that conversation and figure out what works. Because I do have some clients who are able to pay my full fee, it allows me to have reduced pay slots as well for folks who may not be able to pay that full fee but still need therapy and who, I want to be able to treat as a clinician. So there's kind of different avenues, but I think taking insurance and working with local community providers who, have grant funding for brown and black folks who need therapy is 2 kind of really big avenues for me right now. Great question. Thanks.
Great question. And Celeste, it just makes me proud to know that there are therapists out there like yourself who make yourself available and especially explaining all the different avenues and ways to access this. Absolutely, it's a need for so many people that don't realize like they can access the help that they need. So thank you. Torianne, we're coming back to you. Your next question.
How do you track your clients' progress? And if they aren't making any progress, do you recommend them to someone else?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a great question. And so when we think about tracking progress, the way that it works is when I first meet with a client, we have what we call an intake session. And in this intake session, the client comes and tells me about themselves, how they grew up, what they're kind of navigating in life right now, and really why they're seeking therapy at this point in time. At the end of our intake session, I always ask, what are 2 goals that you have that you really want to focus our time on? If in 6 months you come away from therapy, what is it that you want to take with you? What do you want to feel like you accomplished? And so I really have a collaborative approach to therapy where I work with the client to really figure out what it is they want to use this time for. So the goals are kind of the main ways that we track progress over time. Every time I meet with a client, I take notes, and those notes kind of review the goals, they review progress, and I talk with my clients about that. How are you feeling about, whatever the specific issue may be? Let's say they want to reduce symptoms of depression. So every session, we're kind of talking about what the depression feels like, what's getting better, what's not getting better, if there's any other tools we can learn. And so as I continue to meet with folks, I can kind of see, through our conversations, is this therapy really working or is it not working? Are we getting towards the goals or are we not? If it feels like the client is frustrated with progress, or let's say they're not feeling like they're really getting anywhere, then me as a client, as a therapist, can think about whether there are other tools that I have that might be helpful for them, or if maybe they need a whole different set of tools, a different kind of therapy that's going to be best for whatever the issues they're presenting with. And so let's say someone might need a different kind of therapy I don't offer. That's when I sit down with the client and say, hey, we've kind of gone through my expertise. It doesn't feel like it's working, enough. You're not feeling all the progress that you want to feel. I have this referral I can give you. I know someone who's a specialist in this other type of therapy. Would you like to try that? And so that's when we would have that conversation where I feel like, I've run through kind of my tool base, my toolbox, and that it's still not as helpful. And so then we were able to then kind of continue moving forward with another clinician if it feels like that's going to be best for the client. So it really is just an ongoing conversation between me and the client and figuring out what the goals are. And maybe we meet a goal, then we figure out, is there a new goal that you want to set? Is there something else coming up in life that, might be helpful for us to work on? So it really is a collaborative process there.
So yeah, I was just gonna say what I'm hearing is that it's collaborative. You're
Mhm.
constantly flexing and adjusting with the progress of the client. You're not forcing, it's not like if they're not done and healed up in the next 2 weeks, you move on or point them to the next person. You're
Mhm.
working with them, and I love hearing that because I have experienced that with you. You're such a
Mhm.
good listener. And Terrell, we're back to you.
How do you see technology and, psychology working together to, like, better help your clients?
Yeah, we are in the age of AI. So I have clients who are like, I was talking to Chat GPT today, and this is what they were telling me about my issue. And I'm always I'm always welcoming those conversations in because Chat GPT is taking kind of like the predominant knowledge on a certain area and summarizing it. And so in a way it can act like a therapist, but it's still not a person. And so I try to use, I think, technology as a way to start conversations and to continue conversations that might be started with AI and really kind of, let's push further on that. Let's go deeper with that. So it's a great kind of a launching point, I think, with technology. It can get us thinking about things that we may not have had language for before. So people might come in and say, "Hey, I was doing some research, on Google and I think I might be autistic. Here's what I'm seeing." Hey, let's have that conversation, it might not have been something that I had already noticed or may have not picked up on. And so I think it empowers clients to have more knowledge and content to bring to therapy. But I think it's so important that we have the therapist there as another human being that can help walk through whatever the kind of presenting concern might be. There's also social media, which has got all kinds of knowledge on it. There are so many great therapists, psychologists, psychiatrists who are on social media that create content on the daily about all these different issues that we're facing as humans. And I think, again, that is a great way to kind of a jumping off point. Hey, let's talk about, what is this TikTok that you saw? Tell me about it. Why did that kind of stand out to you? What about it did you connect with? And it's a great way to start conversations on issues, or questions or content that, a client might be wrestling with. And because they're being exposed to it over social media and through technology, it's on their mind. And because it's on their mind, they're bringing it to me to talk about. And so I think that can be really useful. We still have to be careful about going to technology for solutions and only technology. But we still want to be able to have these conversations with, I think, licensed professionals who are bringing more of the expertise in it when it comes to just being able to sit in front of a client and kind of notice the energy, notice the body language. All of those things are things that, we can't get with technology. But I love it as a jumping off point.
So, with all of the trauma and things that you hear from couples or individuals on a daily basis, what do you do to protect yourself or to create kind of that barrier between taking on other people's problems?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest things that we can be taught, but also is going to be an ongoing process is how we protect ourselves as clinicians from just the kind of onslaught of everything that we're taking on that we might be absorbing or experiencing or just engaging with in our day to day. Something I like to think is that, when I'm sitting with a client for that hour, I'm present, I'm with them. But when they walk out of that door, unless there's any action items for me, I let that client go. I kind of like I release them. They are out back in the wild. I will see them when I see them. And I'm hoping that the work we have done in that hour is going to be sufficient enough to kind of help them figure out how to do the life in between sessions. I like to say that really therapy is not about what we talk about in the hour. Therapy is really more so about the life that we live in between therapy sessions. That's when we're really figuring out, okay, how do I do this? How do I navigate through these problems that I talked to my therapist about last week? And so, I have little practices for myself that I kind of help when it comes to releasing clients after their hour is done. I can kind of clear my mind. I might listen to a fun song. I might do a little dance in my office in between clients. I might just take a few deep breaths. I have some essential oil sprays that I use. Get some of that lavender going to kind of just shake up the energy in the environment. And at the end of the day, I kind of go back into my life. So I have to remember to conserve my energy because I still have to live a life at the end of the day. I still have to come home, make sure I have capacity for my family. And so It's also navigating energy management. How much energy do I give to each client, and how much energy do I still need for myself at the end of the day? And that's that process where I talked about getting supervised for the first 2 or 3 years after we're out of grad school really helps with, because I don't know yet. I don't know what's going to take for me. I don't know how a hard day is going to affect me. But when I have like a mentor, essentially you're getting a mentor who's helping you through that process. They can kind of also teach you skills for managing work life balance and figuring out kind of what are school or tips and tricks for, each of ourselves of how to really balance being a therapist and then kind of engaging in our own life. So it's definitely an ongoing process, but I like to use some kind of fun things to kind of shake up the energy, to allow myself to release the client back into the wild, into the universe, if you will, and remember that I'm just one part of the solution for someone's story. I'm not the whole solution. And so that's really helpful.
Celeste, you talked a little bit about some of the things that you are currently doing. Can you
Yeah.
share a little bit about how your time in your first job in the corporate world and then your pivot into ministry and then now into private practice? What did you take from those pivots that you are now applying today?
Mhm. Yeah, I think the corporate world really taught me what it looks like to be a professional, how to market myself well, how to like sit in front of someone I don't know and talk vulnerably. I mean, that was probably more so ministry was teaching me how to sit in front of someone that I don't really know well and have a kind of a deep conversation about something that is very close to someone's heart. I think the corporate world also taught me time management, how to make sure that I can keep a schedule. How do I know how to run a meeting? How do I know how to send an email that's professional? So I really learned kind of the basics, I think, in the corporate world when it comes to professionalism. I think ministry really helped me to figure out more so of who I am as a person and how I want to operate and treat other people as people. I learned what it's like to sit with people who are going through really hard things and to not take that on so deeply that I feel like I now am going through something really hard, but be able to hold space for people who are going through something difficult without it causing me to now be incapacitated, if that makes sense. I think I also learned how to love people who are different than me. I see all kinds of clients, people who have things I agree with and may believe things that I don't agree with, and learning how to still be able to help someone that might have very different views, whether it's politically, whether it's faith wise or not, culturally, and be able to still be useful and to see kind of the good in everyone is something I think as a therapist is really important to be able to see, oh, there's still gold in this person. Yes, they're going through something hard. Maybe they've done some things they aren't proud of, but we still have to kind of what we call is hold hope. So can I hold hope for people who are maybe struggling with that or going through a difficult time and still believe that the best is possible for this person if they may not feel that right now?
So good. So good, Celesta. But what I'm also hearing is that your time in the corporate world and ministry, through school and your training, when you were being supervised, none of that was wasted. It all mattered and it's being applied to your business today, your practice today. It's
Mhm.
beautiful. We're going to flip the script now. We're going to get to know our students a little bit. Let's get to know Tori Ann. I've got almost 3 years of context of here in watching you grow since your freshman year in high school. Why don't you share a little bit with Celesta what you're interested in doing when you're done with high school and what direction you want to go in?
The direction I want to go in, I want to be a psychologist. I want to do therapy work just like how you're doing. So that's why I asked the question earlier, how long did it take to get your license? Right now, I'm doing dual enrollment classes that allow me to get my associate's degree by the time I graduate. So I'll have my associate. So after high school, I'm gonna go into a 4-year program that allows me to get my bachelor's and master's at the same time, and then go back again for my PhD. And I might do in the middle of that get my license so I can start practicing while doing the both of them at the same time.
I love that. That's awesome. I think doing that dual enrollment, yeah, that is like already got 2 years out of the way for you, and so you're able to really jump in there. I think that sounds like a great plan, and yeah, it's totally possible to get your license while you're doing your PhD so that you can see clients on the side in between classes and your research and everything. I know folks who have done that, and it's a great path, so that's awesome to hear.
Celesta, do you have a pro tip for Torianne, something that you know now that you wish you would have known at the beginning of your journey becoming a licensed professional counselor?
Mm. Something I wish I had known. I would say, it's important to study hard, but what really matters at the end of the day is how to sit with people. We can always read a book, we can always have a textbook that's going to teach us the theory, but sometimes I think we miss out on like actually seeing the person in front of us. So we're so in our head about how am I going to help them? How am I going to help them? And a lot of times that kind of comes as we go when it comes to just getting to know the person. So always start with curiosity. I remember, starting off, I would get so nervous because I would think, what am I going to do to help this person? I don't know how am I going to help them? When I really just needed to kind of start with curiosity and then the process kind of unveils itself as you go. And so it's a really beautiful thing where, yeah, I might have one idea and from there the ball gets rolling and more is revealed, session by session. So it's not always about being right, but more so of how can I help this person feel seen and heard today when I sit with them? More so about giving the right answer or response.
Torianne, can you share a little bit about how you decided that this was the direction you wanted to go in?
The way how I figured this out, honestly, I don't remember, but I know growing up, I wanted to become a teacher. But then I had a little incident, and I was like, yeah, this isn't for me because you got to have a lot of patience. And I realized I might not be as patient as I thought I was. So then the way how I decided was because of my dad, because of the way how he used to talk to us and let us know, well, maybe you just need to sit back and like listen, look at it from this point of view and stuff like that. So that's how so that's how I got into saying, "Oh, I also want to do that." And plus, I'm a really good listener, and I give a lot of good advice. That's how I chose that path.
Awesome. That's awesome. So for our listeners and Celesta, so you're aware, at Imhotep Institute Charter High School, they do a lot of different things. They do a lot of traveling, culture, right? Expose a lot of different cultures. Torian, can you share a little bit of how you may be integrating what you're learning today at Imhotep with what your future plans are?
I'm a part of the STEM Ambassador program at my school, is where we use STEM, science, technology, engineering, and mathematics to combat real world issues and building sustainable solutions. So the way how my path kind of lean into that is with AI because we focus on artificial intelligence. So AI is becoming like a big thing, especially in the psychology world, and everybody wants to talk to like a robot, and but you need that personal interaction because the robots don't carry as much feeling as a person might be. So I think that's how it like relates to what I do at Imhotep.
Very well said. Celeste, do you have anything to add or any wisdom or encouragement to share with Torianne?
Yeah, I just think we need more clinicians of color for sure out here. I think, as a field, we should really be a reflection of, just society at large. And so, I'm always excited to see people of color who want to work in this field. And so that's really exciting. I think, in terms of advice, continue growing in your own work. I think it's important. Every good therapist has a therapist. So if that's something that you can kind of start thinking about, okay, what does it look like for me to start therapy? What are stuff that might, from my childhood, from my family that I know, I'm holding on to or that might be affecting me and start working through that. Cause I think the best way to learn how to be a good clinician is to be a good client first. And so I know for me, I started going to therapy when I was in college, and that was what kind of got me thinking about being a therapist was that I had a great first therapist who was a person of color. And I was like, man, I mean, that person really helped me. Like, I wonder what it would be like to be able to help people like that. And so therapy has been something that I've personally, done for a lot of my life. And it's been something that's really valuable. So to be able to see that, experience that firsthand as a resource is really important.
Wow, that's so good to relate that first time you started therapy and where you are today. That access matters. While we're here, I'd like to talk a little bit about how you decided to launch off on your own and what that process was like because not only are you a therapist, you are now a business owner. And making that decision, I know does not come lightly. I can personally, you know, but also as an encouragement for our students being an entrepreneur and what that looks like for you.
Yeah, so it was a big decision to kind of figure out, okay, if I have my own business, first of all, what am I going to name it? I have to have business cards. I have to be able to network with people. So luckily, the way that it worked out is that because I was already part of a group practice, I was able to take the clients that I had kind of developed as part of the group practice with me into my own private practice. So I didn't have to start over from zero, which was good. But I talked to a lot of people in my kind of, local community who had their own private practices. And that was a great resource as to talking to other people who had already done what I was looking to do and hearing from them, okay, what are the do's and the don'ts? What works, what doesn't work? And so I had a friend who was renting some office space that I was able to rent from her, and that was really great. Someone I had known from grad school. So I think connections. Stay in touch with those people you go to school with, stay in touch with your mentors because they are going to be the people that are able to kind of help, you know, kind of build the foundation for you in your own practice. And that was very much true for me. So I had people who were already doing it, who were there to support me and talk through it. And I thought, I'm just going to use my name for now. Maybe I'll change it in the future if I want a different kind of business name, but, really keep it simple. Can do an LLC, or not. Yeah, I figured out how to do the insurance piece working through, a company, and so it really was kind of like one step at a time, taking a leap of faith at first and figuring out like, "Okay, is this gonna work?" And I was also a single person at the time, so it was just me supporting myself, which also was kind of like another level of it, is trusting that, "Okay, this is still gonna work out." But for me, it was just a period of time where I felt like I didn't need the support of a group practice anymore. I didn't really need a receptionist. I didn't really need the name of the group practice or their marketing to kind of get my name out there. There were some other marketing vehicles for therapists out there that I was using and felt like I could get my own customers, my own clients on my own at that point. And that was, gosh, that was about 5 years into me, maybe 4 years of me practicing after graduation. So it was definitely kind of the right time.
Right time, courage, the network, the
Yep.
resources, support, all of it. That's
Yep.
awesome. Thanks for sharing that. I
Thanks.
think Vanessa, you have a question.
Yeah, you spoke a little bit about a lack of Black clinicians, and I was wondering if you could speak to why you think that is, and also like if you encountered any barriers or pushbacks on your way up and kind of how you pushed through that.
Yeah, I think it's still culturally, sociologically, that there's still a stigma against sharing your business with people in the Black community. It's something that you keep private. It's not like anyone else's business. And it's, I think, still this mentality of what can someone really offer me that's going to be useful, even if someone has maybe studied and like has the degrees to prove it. You're not me. You don't really know my life. So what can you really offer me? And that has been some pushback that I've gotten from clients before. We're coming in with that mentality and feeling like, I'm trying this, but I don't really think you're going to be helpful. And for some of those folks, it wasn't helpful. For a lot of those folks, it was helpful. And so it's cool to kind of see people change their mind on that. I think for me, I went to school in a primarily white program, and that was difficult because I was wanting to work with populations that weren't reflected in kind of, my peers and the students around me. And so I would be bringing cultural questions or issues that they couldn't really speak to, or even some of my professors couldn't speak to. So I had to kind of find mentors outside of my own school, who could help me navigate that because it wasn't part of their experience. So I would really say, think about in choosing a program, is there going to be the kind of support for a minority student? And if not, are there other people in my community who I can kind of turn to that could offer me that support? So I would say there were times that was definitely difficult, or either hearing some of my white peers, navigate, the world during 2020 and hearing kind of like awakenings for them, or, I've been thinking about this stuff since I've grown up. And so sometimes just the tension of watching a majority people try to navigate, the world during this time. And I even run into that with clients sometimes. And so I think for me, it was a good exercise of how to have patience and hold space for people who are navigating something differently than me that maybe I've always just had to live with. And so definitely kind of pros and cons to that, but overall still useful experiences.
Man, I feel like I need to sit in this moment because it's so much to think about. You're bringing us back to a different time. I'm thinking about, all that you had walked through, getting to where you are today. So again, thank you because you are making an impact in this world and the communities that you serve. Let's go over to Torel. Torel, it's our chance to get to know you a little bit. Also a junior, I feel like I've watched you grow in the past 3 years here. Share a little bit with Celesta what your plans are after high school.
So my plans after high school is like Torian said, I'm gonna graduate with my associate's degree in liberal arts, and I would want to go to a four-year university. I don't really know what university yet, but I know I want to major in something in either engineering, political science, or like finances. And I know those are like very different from each other's, but I have like fascinations in all of those stuff.
That's awesome. I think all of those are valuable. I will say that I actually studied political science in my four-year undergraduate degree. I thought psychology was really silly at the time, to be honest. And so I remember thinking, okay, I like learning about different countries on how different countries interact. And what I ended up learning was that, well, countries are, you know, represented by leaders and leaders are humans too. And so it was really understanding the psychology behind, how different countries interact with each other based on leaders. And so it kind of still went back to the people. And so that was really cool. And looking back now to being like, look at that. Even when I thought psychology was silly, I was still interested in the people part of even running a government, of what it means to be a part of a society. And so, yeah, all of that's valuable. I had a liberal arts education, and yeah, it wouldn't have changed that at all. So I got to be exposed to a lot of different kinds of things, a lot of different kinds of classes. And that was really valuable.
Celeste, can you share with our students here today, but also any of our students that are listening, if they have, most of them are in high school, but we will have some young adults in the future. What kind of advice would you give them who have not decided exactly what they want to do? Or somebody like Torel, who's like, I have five different things I'm passionate about and interested in. Is there anything that you can share with them to help them kind of narrow down in what direction they want to go towards, or just even encouragement or encourage them in that space?
Yeah, I would say it's totally okay to not know. I did not think I would be doing what I was doing today when I was graduating high school, that's for sure. And so that's kind of the cool part of life is that we get to start somewhere and end up totally somewhere totally different. I will say that I think going to a liberal arts school is also valuable, like I was mentioning earlier, because you get to take all different kinds of classes. So I would, say, yes, we have to pick a major or a minor, but take as many different kinds of classes as you can and just get some experience and exposure to different types of studies and see what kind of works for you. I mean, I knew that I was kind of interested in government before, from high school, but, I was also taking classes in science. I was also taking classes in history. I was taking classes in gender studies and was able to kind of be exposed to a lot of different kinds of thinking. And that was really valuable to me to kind of figure out, okay, where could I see myself moving forward? Use, variety is key here.
Good. And then also we've talked previously about personality assessments and understanding yourself, and that's kind of what you do. Is there any resources that our students can go to, or some things that they can think about as they're deciding, what they want to study, or, do they want to go to college right away, or do they want to go start making money right away, or just take a gap year, whatever we're calling it these days? Do you have any wisdom to share with our listeners in that direction?
Yeah, great question. A tool I really like is a personality test called the Enneagram test. That's Enneagram. And the Enneagram is basically a number scale from 1 to 9. There's 9 different personality types. And based on this test, and there's a lot of free tests you can take online for the Enneagram, it gives you a number. And so each of these numbers kind of represent a different personality type. And the cool thing about the Enneagram is that it tells you about what your motivations are and what your maybe areas in need of improvement. So maybe what are my strengths and what are my weaknesses? What really is kind of the drive behind why I do what I do. And so for me, that's a really cool way to work with clients who are just starting to understand more about themselves because we can see, okay, what are my motivators? And that sometimes can help us understand what we really care about, what our core values are, what makes us tick, what are things that we get excited about. And so I would say the Enneagram is a great tool in addition to kind of all the other personality tests out there that kind of help us understand ourselves better. And still being in high school, we're still growing and changing, but I think it's such an important time to start thinking about what our core values are. So much of how we think, how we feel, and how we behave comes back to our core values. And so do I value authenticity? Do I value loyalty? Do I value education? What are the things that for me are kind of these underlying principles that kind of guide or define who I am and why I am the way that I am. So core values, great to start thinking about at this time in life.
That is so helpful. I feel like I wish I would have understood that, or at least, I kind of knew that, but didn't have the grid, right? Didn't have the words to articulate, like, that's what I'm about. I was thinking about Torian. I remember years ago when you said, "I wanted to be a teacher, but I didn't have that kind of patience." And it reminded me, I'm like, I like working with people, and I feel like I have a whole bunch of nurses in my family, but I don't wanna deal with the blood. That's just not where the direction I wanna go in. So, learning early, I always say what I learned early what I didn't wanna do, and that helped motivate me to know what I was gonna do. It was gonna work for people, but not like that. We can go to our students who I know, Torianne, you probably have another question.
From a business standpoint, do you allow your customers to pay before or after the appointment? And if it's after the appointment, how would you go about if they can't afford to pay for the session?
Yeah, so great question from the business standpoint of things. I work with there's different types of electronic medical record systems. And so the way that those work is that with clients who are not using insurance, I will have them at their time of intake put a credit card on file through my, time schedule management system. And so we don't pay beforehand with therapy, we pay after the session. And so they already have their credit card on file and the night of the therapy session, so let's say they met with me, today at 10 a.m., this evening, their card will automatically be run for the session fee. And so sometimes people's cards will bounce and things like that. And that's where I just go, send an email, hey, or give them a call, hey, your card didn't run through. Can we kind of figure out, is there a different card we can use? Do we need to do some sort of a payment plan on this? And so then we have some options there. But yes, the way that you would use your scheduling system, it will have usually an integrated way to kind of have clients pay for their sessions automatically. So you would go through your system and then figuring out a policy. Let's say that a payment doesn't go through. What's your policy on that? And so that's something as a business that you can go ahead and think about. Like for me, cancellation policies. If someone cancels a session 24 hours within the session time, I charge a certain fee for that. So that's something you can go ahead and have in your standard operating procedures. But the systems that we work with for scheduling will allow you to capture the credit cards, or if they're using an insurance card or something like that, there's ways to do that as well.
Torianne, I love that you're asking these questions because we already know 6 years from now, you are gonna have your own practice. We'll speak that into life. I think Vanessa has another question.
Yeah, just with like the state of the world and kind of the weight of the world, and maybe even people are holding on to trauma that they didn't even know. What are some things you tell people, or that people from home, thinking about the affordability and the stigma? What are some things people should look for within themselves, and maybe some things that they can do just to kind of help get through day to day and feel okay?
Yeah, I would say therapy is a great tool when it feels like we're getting stuck in a feeling or we're getting stuck in an experience. So if I'm feeling sad more days than not, probably means there's something deeper going on there. If I'm feeling upset more days than not, probably means there's something deeper going on there that I could really use a professional's help with. So the stuckness is the key for me. That's when I know I got to talk to my therapist because I keep coming back to this thing. I keep thinking about it, or it keeps bothering me, or I'm just not able to quite move forward from this. And that's when I think, we really need to work with a therapist on something like that. Um, Advice that I give the world today is to be gracious with yourself, be patient with yourself and with other people. Talk about it. Talk about what you're feeling. Talk about it with your friends and family who feel safe. Find safe, if we don't have that safe community, find safe community. Whether that looks like, a sports league, that can look like a church, community, that can look like, we like to get together and knit on the weekends, whatever it might be, finding those people that we can kind of connect with is so important. I also think it's important to spend time with ourselves. I'm really an advocate for meditation. I love doing guided meditations, meaning someone is kind of telling me what to do instead of just sitting in quiet. That can be hard for me. I use a free app called Insight Timer that's great for guided meditations, and it just creates a safe space for me to be able to sit with myself and ask myself, like, how are you feeling? How are you doing? And then maybe I take a few moments and write about it, journal about it. draw how you feel, sketch how you feel. There's so many creative ways we can express ourselves now. We may not have kind of the perfect safe community to be able to talk to, that spending time with ourselves is huge, and just creating space for us to feel whatever we might be feeling. And then if we're feeling stuck in it, getting some professional help with that.
Good measure, good reminder of having community, but also having that time to yourself. Miss Jenkins, you're up.
If there's one myth that you could dismantle about therapy or counseling, what would it be?
I think maybe the myth is that, it's this idea that I have to talk about my hardest, heaviest things every time. And that's not necessarily true. Sometimes just talking about, like, this is what came up for me this week. And I just need to talk about what happened yesterday on this phone call with my best friend or whatever it might be. We're not always digging into like our most intense childhood trauma every session. There are sessions that we might get to that point. But I think this idea that, I'm going to be crying every time is not necessarily true. There's a lot of sessions where we're laughing and we're having a good time and we're cracking up. That's also part of healing as well, is that we're having these what we call corrective emotional experiences that feel light, that feel healing, that feel connected. And it's not just like heavy drudgery going through our worst possible memories ever every time. So it's a good balance.
So good. Mythbuster. Love that. Love that.
Mhm.
While our time is starting to wrap up, I want to go back to our students and ask what resonated with them the most today in this awesome conversation. So we'll start off with you, Terrell. What resonated with you the most today? Did you pick up something new?
So what resonated with me most was the whole psychological aspects of things, because psychology is in almost like every single thing that we do. Like we're not really random, like we're really predictable if you really like think about it.
Coming from somebody who's interested in engineering, we're predictable. That all makes sense. That's so good. Good, Torel. And then Torianne, what resonated with you the most today? Were you inspired? Did you feel like the future is more possible in this conversation? Tell us a little bit.
Yes, I feel like the future is more possible. It's just gonna have to be like a lot of work. So I'm already preparing for that and know what like the next path I want to take after this and know what to expect. So I'm not like shocked or like confused about why I have to do this and that. Cause before I was like reading a lot and the 150,000 hours, that's a lot. So I'm already preparing for that so I can go on and do practice of my own.
That's awesome. That's awesome. Go ahead, Celesta.
I was just gonna say, yes, y'all are awesome and excited to hear and see, what y'all do in your future. And, it feels like a lot of pressure, but we're just taking it one moment at a time, one step at a time. So, yes, we want to be aware of the future, but just think about being present in that next step when it'll come together the way it's supposed to.
Right. Okay, one more question for Miss Jenkins. You have been in our program for several years now, meeting different guests and leaders. Somebody like Celesta, a licensed professional counselor and well-being consultant. How has being exposing our students to someone like Celesta helpful for your work at Imhotep Institute Charter High School?
Yeah, so for one, Celeste, you had so many gems, and I think what the students would say, so many bars, just dropping so many very useful tips. And I think that overall, your story of how you transitioned from being in a practice and working for someone through ministry and then going out on your own is very inspiring, especially for students where sometimes I think I see a lot of Torianne and that like shyness that you spoke about. I think there's a lot of similarities in your personality with her, and I think that it was good for her to be able to hear just having that faith in yourself. And despite the fact that she doesn't believe she has a lot of patience, still going to take a lot of patience to do this work. So asking those questions and thinking about like how you want to help people in your own relationships, like how do I feel about these different things, and allowing that to kind of navigate where you end up. I think it's just very inspiring, and I'm glad that Torianne had the opportunity to hear from you today. And I'll even be thinking about like holding space for people coming from a family who I believe needs a lot of therapy. And I think that's why I asked the question about just what it is that you do to not take on a lot of those feelings and a lot of the trauma and stuff that you hear, because I myself am like that. And especially being a teacher and working at a high school level, especially where we've experienced tragedies now 2 years back to back, and listening to the stories of the students and thinking about like, wow, how do I not take this home? Where is my cutoff point? So knowing that as a teacher, it resonated with me as well for you to say that when they're out that door, I do what I can do from my 10 to 6, but after that, it's kind of like they're out in the wild, and I hope that they're able to apply some of the teachings and the lessons and the experiences that we have in the classroom to their life, like you said, in the wild, and just repeat it all over again the following day. And again, that's how I'm measuring that progress. Like I don't always get to see that. Sometimes not in the school year, but sometimes by the time they graduate, and then later on running into them in the workforce or out in the real world, and I get to hear how the lessons apply. That's what counts.
That's awesome, Miss Jenkins. Celesta, in our final minute here, do you have any last final words of wisdom and encouragement to share with our students from Imhotep Institute Charter High School and any of our other listeners?
Yeah, I think, this is a hard career path, but it's such a beautifully challenging career path. Working with humans who are just like us is so humbling, but also really encouraging and inspiring to know that, we're all just out here trying to figure it out. No one's got it together all the way. And it doesn't mean you have to be this perfect human being in order to be a helper in the helping profession. It just means that you have to be aware and be doing your own work and be willing to kind of partner with folks who are on their own journeys of healing as well. So we're all in it together at the end of the day.
We are all in it together. Thank you so much, Celeste. I'd like to thank our students, our very in their very thoughtful questions. And that's Tori Ann and Torel, and also Miss Jenkins and Vanessa. Tori Ann and Torel are students at Imhotep Institute Charter High School. And a special thank you to a personal friend, our amazing guest today, Celesta Palmer, who is a licensed professional counselor and well-being consultant and the owner of cmpalmertherapy.com. I don't know why I can't get that right. cmtherapy.com is your website. Is that correct? Awesome. All right. Well, thank you so much, Celesta. You're listening to Access Co-Leaders, and we'll see you next time.